No matter the industry, leaders need to hold these things dear. Who we serve, how we serve, why we serve. This is People, Process, Service, a Frontline Source Group podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of People, Process, Service, a podcast brought to you here by Frontline Source Group. I'm Tyler Kern, joined as always by the president, CEO, founder, all things Frontline Source Group. It's Bill Kasko. Bill, great to talk to you once again. Great to do another episode of the podcast. How you doing, man?
I'm doing wonderful, man. I've been on vacation for a few days, been back. I'm ready. I'm pumped up, ready to get after it and go on vacation again.
That's what the summer is for, right?
That's right.
We work between vacations, not quite like the Europeans, but
That's right.
We make the best of it. On this episode of People, Process, Service, we're really excited to welcome somebody who I know really, really well. His name is Greg Crumpton. He's a dot connector, really someone that enjoys building relationships with people and connecting people. And that's why I think he's such a great person to have on the podcast. He's also a VP at a company called ServiceLogic, great company. But the reason that we wanted to have Greg on People, Process, Service is I feel like he really embodies so much of what we like to talk about here on the show, and that is the people side of things. Who are the people in your life? The process. Greg's a big process guy, as you have to be in the HVAC business, and then service. I've learned so much just hearing Greg talk about what customer service means to him and how he's evolved and adapted that over the years. So, Greg, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us, man.
Well, Tyler, Bill, thank you both for having me. I'm excited because it's fun to be on this side of the mic, so to speak. Tyler and I have done some fun stuff in the past, and being able to reconnect with him on another podcast is really, really fun. And the topics are, when you just described what you described about the topics, it's my mind starts just swirling of fun stuff that we're going to talk about. So looking forward to diving in for sure.
Well, very, very excited to have you and appreciate you taking the time. And, it's funny. I was looking over kind of your history and background. And again, the people, process, service part of it was something that we came about when we realized we started the company. We started Frontline, and we talked about, you build this organization and your people are your most important asset, and how you gather all of that together and have to have the best people. And then, of course, to build a successful business, you have to have a process and a way to not only run the business, but to grow, nurture the individuals as they go on. And then you have to have a service. You have to give a service that gives to your customer, to keep your customer satisfied, to have that longevity over time. And what we realized is that those three pillars are the exact same pillars of the way that we live our lives. And so it's very interesting when you put the two together and look at an individual, their background, where they came from, where they're at today. So when I looked at your background, first of all, you're in the HVAC business, which made me immediately go, it's the stupid joke, but it's like, you're a cool guy, right? Cool.
Yeah, Dr. Cool is what I like.
Yeah, there you go, Dr. Cool. So when I saw dot connector, I thought, he should really be like the doctor of connectors or something. But, the cool guy that's doing all this. But you think about the people and your history of what you've been through, and really just kind of start from that part of it, where the people and how you interact to get you to where you're at today. Can you kind of just talk about that focus of what you do?
Bill, when you were explaining that, three things flashed in my head. And when I was a young guy, I'm 58 now, but when I was...
That's still young.
Say when I was 25 or 28, I used to think about my business, the HVAC business, being three things: the technology around the air conditioning itself, the science and the math, the paperwork, which was how we communicated with the customer as far as what we found wrong, but then, having to deal with the people side of it. So the actual interaction. So I always thought those things were pretty equally balanced, kind of the three-legged stool. And then the further I got into my career and the more that I learned and studied about people, it's really like 80-10-10. It's like 80% people, 10% process of the paperwork of, how do we get from A to B? And then the science and the math is the other 10%, with the heavy, heavy emphasis on the people, the communication, how you feel, how you act. You guys have a nice office. If a technician comes into your office, how should they act? How do they respect your space? How do they clean up? How do they be courteous to the lady or the gentleman at the front door who helps engage them into your, there's so much to the human side that I think we grow into that. So I've certainly grown into that as time has moved forward. So always
when you look at that history, though, from where you started to where you are today, and you think about the people that helped you get there, are there different times you think in your life when you recognized you have your internal people, your staff, versus the external side of the way that you manage or you run your life?
Yeah, absolutely. And oddly enough, I have started a new thing that's not a thing yet, but it's soon to be a thing. That's called HVAC Icons. And what this is going to be is a memorial or a site where you can go and honor these people that have helped you in your career. Because regardless of what industry you're in, people have those people who help them get to that next level. And it may be through somebody that gave you a ride to school when you didn't have a car. It may be somebody who helped you when you were struggling with a specific problem. Maybe it's somebody that bought you lunch, whatever it is. You have all these little nuanced things out there in your orbit that have impacted your life, your career, your education, whatever. So I'm going to make a way to memorialize those folks. But in doing that process, I had all these people that came rushing into my head. And it started because I read an obituary this weekend. My wife and I were talking, and I happened to be looking for a person. And I found out the gentleman had passed away in January. This guy taught me so much in my first and second year of apprenticeship school that I don't think I ever got to tell him as an adult how much I appreciated what he helped me with. Now, he helped me in a couple of ways. He showed me the proper way, and it's a crazy way I got to thinking about it, but I got an RV that I got to do some rewiring on, so I was thinking about this one particular connector, and I remember Randy taught me how to properly crimp the wire for this type of wire so it would never break again. And that's what started this whole rabbit chase down the hole of finding this guy. But you remember things like that. I remember my dad teaching me things. My dad was my father, my friend, and my boss, and my teacher in trade school, all four things at one time, which was quite comical now. It wasn't very funny then. Probably funnier for me than it was him. But he taught me things about customer care and customer service that I wasn't able to process, but I was able to log it. And then as you mature into your job, as you mature into relationships, you go, that's what he meant. And you're able to start, I guess you're starting to put together a trail of successful moments and tie those things together to help you get to where you're going. So a long way of saying I'm flooded with memories and moments of people helping me in technical ways, in human ways, in business ways that I'm overloaded with them in such a good way.
So we have a gentleman that works with us, Mike Cook. We call him Grocery Store Mike. So he specializes in placing individuals for the grocery industry. And the story is 40 years ago, Mike and I worked together sacking groceries in a grocery store. And we were both, same deal, influenced by someone who he passed away about 10 years ago. And Mike and I reconnected 3 or 4 years ago. And that connection it still resonated with me so strong that I'm very much the man I am today because of this person influencing me at the age of 16, 17, 18 years old. And Mike had the same experience. And when we connected again and realized that, we created a scholarship in his name because this is a gentleman who we found out not only touched us, but once we did this and put it out there, we have had hundreds of people that have come out to say what an influence he was on them, good and bad. But at the end of the day, even if it was a bad experience, they look back at it and say what a difference they are today because of having that person in their life at that time. And that's where it's interesting. I think when you look at your history and going through an industry and what you've done and connected with individuals, you build on that as you go forward. We don't realize how influential and how important people truly are in our day and the way that we interact and the way that we just operate as human beings. We kind of forget about it in a lot of ways until events happen or something happens that reminds you again, and you go, wow, that person really made a difference to me. Even a little thing like crimping of a wire. When you said that, I was trying to think back. When was the first time I ever did that? And then I remembered, oh yeah, it was when I did it as a kid, took the socket off the wall and shorted out the house or something, So I didn't get that lesson. But when you think about where you've been to where you are today, those individuals that remind you of that is just a very important part of who you are today.
No, it really is, Bill. And I'm very fortunate in that I'm at a point in life to where I'm able to reflect back on those people who influenced me. And I'm at a point to where people that I've influenced are beginning to tell me that. And man, you're talking about a humbling experience. I was a year ago, a good friend of mine, he and I worked together like a lot. Like we were probably like married kind of working hours together. And he was telling me a story about one of his younger leaders that were up and coming within the organization. And the grown man told a story of how one morning I influenced his life and helped him make a decision that he is so glad that he made the way that I had suggested it go versus the way he was leaning towards. I never thought about it again until 20 years later. He tells the story one morning about how I was able to really kind of out of the blue help him make a decision he was struggling with. And a lot of times, I hope the gentleman that you in grocery store Mike hang out with was able to know that, because it's so rewarding. And I don't mean in a grandiose backslapping kind of way, but just a mental and an inward peace that you get when you've helped somebody without this big fanfare. It's just kind of a quiet victory for me.
Right. Well, and I think when you look at that and you also watch a person grow, and so when you think about the other pillar, this process is that one of the fun parts is that when you have that ability to mentor, to grow, to show someone how to crimp a wire, and then you watch them or know that they're going to go do it on their own and they're going to be better at what they're doing, you create this process around you of sharing that wealth of information. And I don't know, I'm not an HVAC guy. I barely can. I know how to turn the temperature down in the house and get yelled at, but that's about as far, and change a filter maybe. But you think about the intricacies of learning a trade like that, which to me, the trade side of things in this country it's not the same anymore. I mean, we need people that understand and know how to do this, but we don't promote it in the glamorous way as it used to be. For multiples of reasons. Technology could be education, could be pay, whatever you want to call it. But when you think about it, it's such a necessity to have a process to give that back and to actually teach someone else how to do things so that others can still learn the same trade and learn how to do things.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up a point that, we could talk for 2 weeks on, because it's a topic that I'm very passionate about, is trying to reestablish trade programs in public schools and other places. It's the goal is, the way I describe it, learn one, teach one. So if you learn a trade, your duty as a tradesperson is to teach another. So when Randy taught me how to crimp a wire, my job is to go help somebody else learn how to crimp a wire. And that's an overly simplified explanation. But the point is, if you were gifted with somebody anointing you with their time and their talent, let alone all the theoretical stuff you got in school. I mean, we all go to school at night in my trade, most of us, and then you work during the day. So yes, you're getting theory, but when you can go onto the job and you have these experienced journeymen that can help you apply theory, and now your job is to go help that next youngster, that's when things really start to click in the trades world. We missed a 30-year window because we took it out of public education. So we're now bringing that exposure and awareness back. So there are a lot of people my age that get that fact that we need to give it back. But then we have a 30-year gap to the 25-year-olds who are just now understanding they have to learn enough to give it back. So it's a big thing to overcome. But it really comes down to the process that, as you described, that you build around you is how you should operate. In my opinion, anyway. I've always operated from a educational platform. Even when I was a commissioned salesperson, I wasn't good at selling. I was good at explaining and showing and counseling so that when someone was ready to buy, they knew what they wanted to buy. I really was not a good salesperson. I probably still am not because I don't sell anymore. But my goal was so that when I was in front of somebody, I gave them enough information so that when the need arose, they knew who to call. And I think that's part of my dot connecting is being able to have counsel with people and coaching them and be an advocate and advisor without being known as that salesperson. So they didn't mind connecting me with their friends and family and colleagues. So that's how I kind of grew my network of, what it is today, was by being an educational, spokesperson, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Well, and Greg, can you explain maybe how you learned and developed some of those soft skills of talking to people and interacting? Because I know just from some of our conversations that sometimes it's not the technical aspect that's challenging for people that get into trades. Sometimes when it comes to HVAC and other trades, it's about developing some of those soft skills as well, where you learn how to educate, how to properly talk to people, how to interact, and do some of those things that ultimately are the building blocks of the process that makes you eventually successful.
Well, Tyler, I think I can only speak for me, obviously, but what worked for me was presenting people with information in terms they could understand. People didn't go to school to learn vapor compression. That's what I went to school for, so that I knew the compression ratio of a cylinder and a piston. Nobody cared about that. And that message was really brought home to me one day when I worked on this fairly complicated system. And I identified a failed part, talked to the customer, got the approval, went back the next day, replaced that part, restarted it, found another failed part. These are all legitimate things that happen in big commercial systems. On the third day, my boss called and said, hey, what's going on with XYZ? And I said, well, I found 3 faulty things, and today is the thermostatic expansion valve. He didn't know what that was. He was a business guy. He said, you know what, Crumpton, your customer doesn't care about the thermostatic expansion valve. What they care is that you're not making cold air come out of that ductwork and they're hot. And I remember driving to the job that day thinking, wow, that is really solid information I got to figure out how to use, because I'm all tied up in the technical. I've got the system evacuated to 500 microns and I pressure tested it to 250 PSI. None of that mattered. What mattered was they were still hot. And I think by being able, as I matured, to think about it in those terms, it really helped me clarify my communication of what the problem was, what I thought the best solution was and then present it to them so they could make an informed choice.
It's interesting when you talk about that change to that 20, 30-year gap, which is, I agree, you could probably have a whole another 2 hours to talk about just that. But what do you think, what did we lose? Where did we lose? And why is that there? Was it technology changing? Was it a disinterest in something? I mean, what caused that?
Well, I just read a really interesting book, Bill, that I would tell you, anyone that wants to understand this question, wants to have a good answer, could get a lot of information. It's called Men Without Work. And what happened, this is by a guy named Nicholas Eberstadt. And we had several things that occurred at one time. We had technology come into the schools and into our lives. We had a population that came back from wars that did not want their offspring working physically like we had to work. We also had single parent homes becoming really prevalent. So we had these many things happening at one time. We also had a crime increase in the crime of our country that started in 1965 that is just a phenomenal amount of people that have been through the legal system that also takes them out of our labor pool, so to speak. 22 million people have a felony conviction that are of working age, which I found just crazy numbers. But anyway, not judging any of that, only speaking to the facts that we had several things occur. When we started, so I got out of high school in 1982. And when I graduated from high school, we had one computer in the school, and you programmed it with these punch cards. And I remember making a happy birthday banner out of this stupid punch card. So you go from that to this thing I'm holding in my hand in a period of 40 years. The whole world thought we had to learn electronics. We had to learn programming. Excuse me so much. We had to learn so much of the digitization of the world that people forgot about their toilets had to be flushed and repaired. People forgot that, I cut the light switch on and I didn't have any light come on. So, we had enough of my generation. I'm the last year of the baby boomers. So we had enough of me to carry us to this point. But now, as the youngest boomer, we're retiring in droves, man. We lose 10,000 people a day from the blue collar baby boomer crowd. We're not bringing anywhere near that many people into that equation. So I think that it was the culmination of all of those things. And the high school guidance counselors played a huge role in it by saying, you got to go to college or you're going to wind up being like that guy. That guy would happen to be standing on a ladder changing a light bulb. You didn't want to be that guy. So then there became a stigma around the blue collar trades that we battle to this day. People have this vision of what a plumber is. It's the butt crack meme that we've all seen a million times. Or it's the electrician, with these sparks flying out of a panel. But nobody thinks about a radiologist technician. Nobody thinks about an MRI repair person. So you have all these things that we're so dependent on in our normal life that we simply took for granted that somebody was going to make happen. Well, all the somebodies are retiring. So funny story about me holding this iPhone up. Last week, I'm at a data center conference in Washington, D.C., and data centers are huge power consumers. There's no doubt about it. Well, the activists came to rain on the parade of our data center. But I found it really funny. They were all taking pictures and texting each other off of an iPhone. And I'm sitting there thinking, do they not know where that data's going? But kind of a funny story. But I think the culmination of technology, aging, a a new generation, a creative way of thinking. People got turned on, and in the '60s, and we changed the culture. The work ethic shifted. So a lot of things happened at one time. I know it's a long answer, but I apologize.
No. It's great because there's not. I don't know that there. The hard part is it's not just one part. It's so many different pieces of it, and you touched on many of them. But when thinking back, over the years, and we talk about the people that are around us in business and the process of business, and even the service that we give. What about on the personal side of you? What have you seen your personal life change to get where you're at today? Both the people around you and the process, the way you live, and the service you give. How has that changed, do you think?
I think it's changed in a way where I don't take anything for granted anymore, for sure. My sister has a PhD, and my sister always begrudged the fact that me, as a blue collar guy, made more money than she did because she went to school for 9 years. I went to school for 4 at night. So I've often had this thought process of my sister or her peers and how they thought blue collar people lived versus white collar people. So I've always really tried to look at my personal life of making sure that I'm living not above my means, but within my means, but also have a big circle of people that I've interacted with. So I've often tried to make sure I blended with people that are not of my trade, or I didn't go to night school with them or whatever. I've just tried to increase the circle of influence, so to speak, so that I could learn more, because people that go to college, they learn a whole lot about being a social creature, and they learn how to interact, and they learn how to communicate, and they learn how to deal with things that we don't get in a trades program. Back when I went through, we learned pressures, temperatures, voltages, and that kind of thing. I didn't understand what a rush week was for a sorority and all the stuff that went around with that, or, pledging to a fraternity.
Right.
All the stuff that helps you mature as an adult, you don't get on the technical side, or did not get. That is changing. We are doing soft skills training now. But I think what it did for me was it made me look at things in a much broader spectrum. I grew up in a blue collar household, but yet once a year, my mom would take me and my sister to go see a play and to a nice dinner, so that we learned how to act properly in public, and just more of a social presence, I think, was a big thing that I've tried to carry forward, and then staying up to date on what's going on technology wise, history wise, trying to be politically astute without being politically active, meaning I don't go out and petition anybody, but I'm aware why they are petitioning different groups. So I think, I've been able to broaden my horizons based on mixing with a different crowd, because I started at a little bit in my mind of a negative gap of not being able to be mature enough to know what I needed to know, because I got out of high school early. I got out when I was 17 years old. And I had the mental capacity of probably a 12-year-old maturity wise. So I had a long way to go, and probably still do if you ask my wife. But that's just kind of how I did it,
Right. And then the HVAC business is interesting as well to understand. What got you into that? What was the passion behind that?
So my dad was an industry guy. He worked for a large mechanical contractor in the Atlanta market that a lot of my family has worked at over the years, and currently still works at. So I kind of grew up in the business, and man, I love the business. I'm one of these people that when I was out of school, out of high school, or out of grade school for a teacher's work day or what have you, I was with my dad at work. And I was probably the only kid in the sixth grade who could braze copper tubing together or could, crimp that wire improperly early. So I had a natural on ramp, with my dad. And once I began, I was a horrible high school student because I did not like school. And now I know why, because I wasn't challenged. It was too easy in my public school. So it was so easy. In fact, I didn't do any of the work, Bill. So I guess that's how easy it was. So college, for me was not on the table just from an academic standpoint, but I had zero desire. I was fortunate in my last 2 years of high school, I was able to attend a half-day trades program at a local community college, and I fell in love with welding. And that saved me GPA-wise to where I could graduate. And once I began working at this company where my father and my aunt and my uncle and my future wife worked, I just really, really began to click. And when I started going to the apprenticeship program and taking the math and English and the not much English, but enough to write a sentence, the science, the electrical, I really started to excel, and I knew I had found my place in life I needed to be. So I go through this 4-year apprenticeship school. I wind up teaching at that school the year I got out, the next year, and taught there for several years just because I love the industry, and it's magic, man. I love it. So I love helping our young people that I now get, exposure to. In my company, we have about 6,000 people across the North America, and I interact with, believe it or not, a large majority of those that work in the field, because I'm kind of the guy who owned the business, sold the business to ServiceLogic where I work, but I'll still get up on the roof, man. I'll go to California and jump on the roof with somebody and look at a problem they're having just because I enjoy it. And I get to spend time with young people. We have a young guy in Phoenix. His dad works for us. This young man works for us. I was able to spend a half day with this guy. He's 20 years old. And he's going to be a star. His dad's a star. This kid's going to be a star. But it's all about that one-on-one time in something, and our something's an industry that I really like to be part of. And when you're happy doing it, it's not hard to share.
Well, and that's probably a good kind of segue when we're kind of talking about all of this too. Wrapping up is, looking at your industry today and your 40 years of industry experience and the success you've had and still involved day in, day out, the service part now really at the end of our careers, what are you able to do, or what do you want to accomplish, or how do you even accomplish that to get people excited about this industry again and get them involved in something where there's opportunity to grow and to have a career like that, a successful career?
So for me, Bill, I get people excited about the industry because I talk about the 1 or 2% of our industry that nobody knows about, which is mission critical cooling. And we talked about the iPhone and the data center earlier. So those have a very unique way of air conditioning. In fact, you don't air condition a data center. You reject heat from the data center because you're not concerned about the air. You're concerned about the equipment. I've been able to reach a lot of young people, male and female, which is a whole nother topic of how we attract more young ladies into the industry and veterans. I've been able to talk to people and get them a little more excited about it from a mission critical aspect, as opposed to just making cold air come out of the hole in the ceiling. Like how can what I do every day at work impact the ability for my grandma to communicate to her grandkids across the country by tapping on this goofball device? And I think when we can explain things like that, or Chat GPT is in the news right now. when you can explain to someone the math and science and electrical and energy that go into creating, when you ask Chat GPT to write your book report because you're too lazy to read the book, what has to happen in order for it to render that story? What happens behind the scenes? What happens in the concrete building with no windows that allows that data to flow? And then once that data starts to flow, this heat comes into the atmosphere that you had to dissipate into the outdoors. If we can make it fun, or at least challenging to think through, or exciting, rather than, boring air conditioner with a filter, as you described, there's only one way to put a filter in, and that's the right way. So once you master it, you're really good at it.
You've never been to my house.
Well, you think about this. We work for a very large company that does mass distribution of items that show up on your doorstep every afternoon. And these buildings that these people occupy have 100 air conditioners on the roof of every one of their buildings. You can't get really excited about doing the maintenance on unit number 87 because the 86 that you just did are identical. How do you keep the energy to do the other 13 to get to the end with excitement? So I think by showing people the different verticals within the industry, not just my industry, but anything, electrical is the same way, petroleum is the same way, oil rig. I mean, you can do all kinds of things. And if you think about each trade, so to speak, it has a different set of verticals within that trade that you don't even think about, just because we take things for granted. But in that office you guys are sitting in is a sprinkler system, for fire protection. Somebody has to maintain the air compressor to make sure that pre-action system works when it's supposed to. We don't think about things like that, but if you can explain that from a preservation of life, preservation of equipment, preservation of an asset standpoint, it sounds a whole lot better than working on an air compressor.
Well, and to take things back to your story, Greg, you were talking about just not being the best student in the world. Is there a part of you that, especially from this service mindset and the service side of things, thinks that there are plenty of students out there that are like you that weren't great students or aren't great students, but would excel doing something with their hands and excel being outside and being on roofs or doing some of these jobs that just maybe have never been exposed to that? And if so, what sorts of efforts do you take to make sure that that young people these days are exposed to these opportunities that exist?
So Tyler, I know you're a hockey fan, so I think you have to use a Wayne Gretzky quote here: is you skate to where the puck is going to be. Yeah. And what that means for me when I say that is that we have to make the awareness of these trades available to young people of where they are. Where are they? They're on Instagram. They're on social media. They're on short segment video. So how do we communicate the fact that, when your mom wants to flush the toilet, somebody has to know how to repair that toilet? But how do you do that without making that sound really gross? You have to be creative. You have to use social, and you have to hit people where they live. And doing a 30-minute episode of video of how to replace a toilet fill valve is not going to stimulate somebody to want to join that trade. But by showing some of the cool places that have toilets that have to be maintained, you may just spark the awareness. But I think you do that through short content format, whether it be micro training, microburst advertisement, great podcast with Bill and Tyler. However we're doing it, it's about awareness.
Someone's got to maintain the toilets at the Vatican, right? Or something like that.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because when I was walking around the Vatican, I was mesmerized at how antiquated but brilliantly engineered those mechanical systems were way back then. It's like the Romans and their water distribution. They had that figured out a whole lot earlier than anybody gives them credit for. But, awareness is the key. And, I'm all about the kid at church who graduated and doesn't know where to go. The kid who my buddy calls me and says, "Hey, my kid's got a degree in this and he can't get a job with this. What do you think?" And we get him an internship at electrical and the guy blossoms. It's just, it's hand-to-hand combat. I don't know how else to say it. It's grab one, take one, learn one, teach one. It's really hand-to-hand. And there's no mass method that's going to win the battle other than people like me that are my age, making sure that they give back on their way out.
Yeah, and just for the record, ChatGPT was that used to be called my little sister.
Writing all your school essays.
That's the way it used to work.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, it all has changed, and it's one of those that you have to be able to give back. And Greg, I love the story and that history of doing that. And I think you're right. We could probably talk I know I could go for hours about what we need to do to re-energize this entire generation, 2 generations, about work ethics and about working and about ideas and concepts. And there's so many opportunities. I roll over every time I hear somebody go, it's hard. I can't find any work, or I can't find this. And I think that's just not a possibility. That's just because you're not thinking except right here. And just like you, all of us have had to work hard and find our direction, and you give back. And there's a point when, for me, I enjoy that as well. In the people business, you may not see a big correlation between the two, but what we do is work with people, and then tomorrow you get a phone call and that person's not the same person we were working with the day before. Our product that we sell is very difficult to manage and maintain because we're human beings. And so I can relate to everything you're saying, and especially getting people into a business when they say, "Oh, well, I went to college for a degree and blah, blah, blah. Why would I want to be a recruiter?" And you have to have a passion for this. Yes, there's a financial part of it that comes around, but you have your ups and downs, just like in your business. And you have days that are good, days that are bad, days that are going to be much longer because it's 110 outside versus maybe in the wintertime, or vice versa. And same with us during a recession, non-recession. So I can completely relate to exactly what you're saying. And I love the fact that you're really giving back now, and motivating and encouraging and educating individuals to understand this business, because it's a great opportunity for anyone out there.
Well, it really is, Bill. And I think, I hear both sides of the coin. I hear people say, "Well, I can't find anyone to work. I can't get anybody to show up." But yet I still find great kids out there, man, because I'm looking for them. I'm not stereotyping everybody. Just because the young lady has a nose ring, she can take that out and come to your building. It's okay. There are a million ways to look at opportunities if you just look at them with an open set of eyes and a clear lens without being, so stereotypical of everything. And there's a lot of good kids out there that are dying to work. We have 5, almost 6 generations now in the workplace. And to be able to communicate across 6 generations of people with one message is hard. You have to speak 6 different languages, from people that are older than me, all the way down to the alpha generation that are coming out of high school now. There's a heck of a lot of difference in how to communicate and what messages to communicate the proper way. And you just have to be open to learning and staying fluent of what works, what's resonating right now. So it's just about awareness. It's about staying in the game, but you've got to enjoy the game to stay in it too.
Yep. 100%.
Really, really well put. Really well put. Well, Greg, thank you so much for joining us here on People Process Service and sharing more about your story, just about what people process and service mean to you. It's been fascinating just getting a chance to learn a little bit more. And I hope the audience out there really enjoyed getting a glimpse into the world of the trades, because it's a fascinating one, and one that
it's so needed, Tyler. I mean, it's a need. It's not. It's something that I think it's just it's not talked about enough.
Yeah. So really happy to highlight it here on the podcast, Greg, and thank you so much for your time.
No, I certainly enjoyed it. I'm always willing to try to just, I mean, if we can get one person thinking differently about what they're going to do tomorrow, then everybody wins.
Yeah,
100%. I agree. Just do it one at a time. One at a time, Greg.
One at a time is right. GregCrumpton.com is the website if you want to learn more about Greg, all of the different things he has going on, because it's not just ServiceLogic. Greg is involved in a ton of different stuff. He also has a podcast himself called Straight Outta Crumpton. And so if you
I love that name. I love the name. I love that. Genius. The dot connector.
My buddy Howie Barber named that for me, so he gets all the credit.
Love it.
Shout out to Howie for naming the podcast. And so check out more about Greg. Go check out the podcast there as well. And stay tuned for more episodes of People Process Service coming at you very, very shortly. So subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and stay up to date with the latest. But for this one, for Bill Kasko and Greg Crumpton, I'm Tyler Kern. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to People Process Service, a Frontline Source Group podcast. Remember to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or wherever you like to get your podcasts. For more information, visit frontlinesourcegroup.com.